Hello everyone, Mystery here, and if you are a long-time viewer, you might remember this video with this particularly ugly yellow thumbnail from about 8 months ago, where I tried to rank the various power levels of the classes in Darktide. But so much has changed since then, including a near full rework of the Ogryn class. So it's time to ask that question again. Which Darktide class is the most powerful? Before we get into this discussion, let's talk about this video's sponsor. That's right, it's me. Whether you're a new viewer or you've been a part of the Mystery Machine for some time, I appreciate you watching. Your likes, comments, and especially subscribing helps push me in the algorithm. I really couldn't do it without you, and especially my channel members, who you'll see on screen. They get access to my music playlists, a download of all of my mods that I use in-game, and pictures of my adorable dog, Bernie. Before we get started, I just want to put a disclaimer right up here in the front, which is that I don't intend this video to disparage players of any class. By the very nature of the video, obviously, some class is going to be ranked Mr. E's weakest class, right? But please don't use this as an excuse to be like, oh, Mr. E said that this is like the weakest class, so I'm never inviting it to Havoc again. That's definitely not what I intend by this. Obviously, 95+% of how useful a class is comes down to the capabilities of the player behind the keyboard or behind the controller, right? So you can't really judge it by that. But what I really want you to take away is that if you are going to invest 1,000 hours in learning any one of these characters, well, which one does it pay off the most to get the best at? Which one is going to dominate the hardest if you had the same level of experience across all classes? And we're going to measure that against the metric of playing it into the new Havoc game mode. In order to talk about which class is strongest, we have to first discuss how we are going to quantify that strength. And in my last video, I ranked Zealot as the strongest class, followed by Veteran, then Ogryn, and finally Psyker. And these classes were given their relative power rankings based on a hypothetical clutch situation, where in that video I stated we would have a lone player of whichever class that had to deal with an unspecifiably large enemy force, presuming that there's trappers and maybe a boss and lots of crushers or whatever in there, and then they had to proceed with the mission and rescue their allies. And the reason I had to use that hypothetical situation in that video was because at the time when I made that video, there was no content hard enough to truly challenge the limits of any given class. Now, however, we have access to a new metric by which we can measure these classes, which is the game mode Havoc. Since Havoc is the most difficult challenge that you can face in the game, it seems like it's a fair test of whether or not these classes can stand against something really, really insanely challenging. And so this time around, when we do these rankings, we're going to base our power rankings on how well these classes can deal with the threats that Havoc specifically poses. And I suppose it bears repeating at this point that I am grading this against high Havoc difficulty, so this ranking of powers doesn't apply unilaterally all the way down the tier list of difficulties into like Sedition or Drizzle or whatever the bottom difficulty is, right? Because on those difficulties, there's almost no or no bosses, there's very few elites and specials, there's no damage going out, so things like defenses, things like boss killing ability, they just aren't important. You could stunt on the entire game with just a single character playing with gray weapons if you're sufficiently skilled. But on the high difficulties, that is where you really are testing the mettle of these classes themselves, whether or not their abilities and their weapons are up to the challenge of dealing with the massive amounts of stuff that the game will send at you. And speaking of those challenges, what challenges does Havoc put players against? So how will we be ranking these classes? And I've narrowed it down into like 6 different categories, and I'm going to try to talk a little bit about each of these when we're discussing the different classes' strengths and weaknesses. So the first category that I'm going to rank these classes with is their ability to dispatch hordes, their horde control, because you can get very easily overwhelmed and surrounded on all sides by hordes. This happens in all difficulties as well, but if you can't kill faster than the rate that the enemies can spawn, or you can't get yourself out of those situations and reposition, you are going to get overwhelmed, you're going to get killed. So Horde control is number one. The second is removal of high priority targets. So we're talking about elite enemies like Crushers and Maulers and Ragers, as well as specials like dogs and trappers that can be really, really dangerous. The ability to remove those quickly and efficiently and not let them get a number of attacks off is going to be big points to whichever classes can do that the best. The third thing is something that is new to Havoc, and it really only applied to Auric Maelstroms before, but now if you are playing into Havoc, you need to have boss damage. Boss damage is super important, not only against monstrosities, which many classes do have pretty good damage against, but extra bonus points if you can kill captains, because their shields have are very, very resistant to range damage, and yeah, beating them down in a short amount of time can save you games. So yeah, being able to kill bosses is very, very important. Fourth, it's defenses. There's so much damage that goes out on Havoc, not only to you, but to your team. So being able to just either block or dodge or nullify that damage in some way is a huge asset to a character. Fifthly, we've got crowd control. Crowd control is something that in the old version of Havoc, I might not have considered it that valuable, but now there is so much stuff. There's times where waves of bulwarks will come crashing in on you, or like 6 Crushers will walk up, or you'll have 3 bosses on you at once, and having abilities and weapons and whatever it is that can get those enemies off of you and off of your team and potentially even push them into disadvantageous spots or even to their deaths is really important. Creating space is so important right now. And finally, bonus points awarded for any good synergistic abilities that help the whole team. So, I mean, everybody has their own different auras that I think are going to be helpful to the team, but certain classes have different auxiliary benefits to the team just by their mere presence. So we'll talk about those. All right, let's talk about our first class, which is the Veteran. The Veteran is the premier ranged killer of the 4, and he has pretty decent horde killing potential. He's got the Shredder grenades, his best grenades. He gets 3 of them. He regenerates them all the time. There's even builds you can lean into that emphasize those grenades. So his ability to blast away groups of enemies with those is pretty sizable. He also gets extra horde killing potential if he's using his best weapon, which is the plasma gun. The plasma gun is a overpowered weapon for certain, but hey, we're not shaming overpowered stuff here. We're in fact glorifying it in this video. But the plasma gun is the king at sniping elites and specials. You can cross map gunners and trappers and all that stuff no problem. Which, speaking of, in terms of special killing, the Veteran is uniquely equipped to benefit extra from killing specials. He gets 6 seconds of cooldown reduction every time he kills a special enemy. So that means that his ultimate is coming up very quickly, and you can't talk about Veteran ultimates without talking about the best ultimate in the game, which is Voice of Command. The only ultimate that you would really even be considering if you are playing Veteran into one of these in-game scenarios like this. It is so intimately tied to his defenses that I have to mention them in the same breath, because this ultimate not only replenishes all of your own toughness, but it gives you gold toughness, which is just super hard to die when you have, and it gives all your allies gold toughness for a full 15 seconds. And if you are killing elites, if you're killing specials at the rate that you should be as a Veteran, then you have near full uptime on this. In addition, it has the highest tier of knockdown potential of any abilities in the game. It's tied with things like the Void Blast Staff and Ogryn's Ogryn Bomb for just, it is able to knock back bosses and knock down Crushers and stuff like that, even out of their animations. So he has really decent crowd control, but his defenses and crowd control are tied to whether or not he has his ultimate ability up. And that means that in the same vein where he is really strong, he has the strongest ability in the game, he doesn't have a whole lot of variety in choices. I think that's a complaint that a lot of people have about the Veteran. It's like, he's got one ultimate. The other 2 are pretty garbage comparatively. Finally, penultimately, let's talk about his boss killing potential. He's a fairly decent boss killer when we're talking about monstrosities. especially when you're using Focus Target as your keystone, because that keystone allows the bosses to take an extra 20 to 32% damage, which can be very, very nice when you got a big chunk of 100,000 health to tear through. But it's not often the keystone that people bring. Oftentimes they're bringing Weapon Specialist, which means he's going to be even better at melee killing. He does really well against monstrosities generally, but he struggles a little bit more dealing with captains because they do have those range protective shields. They take 50% reduced damage when they have their shields up, so he has to rely on his melee attacks with Dueling Sword or whatever it might be in order to get damage on them. So you probably want a more melee focused class for dealing with captains rather than the veteran. And let's finally talk about his class synergies. There's one major synergy. There's one major reason to bring a veteran that I think everyone is aware of, which is, well, one, the gold toughness, right? Everyone loves just getting a constant shout, but the survivalist aura is just so valuable. Having that 1% ammo regen every time, well, every 5 seconds when you kill an elite is it's amazing, especially if you're like an Ogryn or someone who's using a weapon or even a Zealot with a flamer. Having that trickle of ammo coming in constantly is extremely valuable in Havoc, where ammo is a more scarce resource. So he gets big points for being the class that happens to have the ammo regenerating aura. And I think that's about everything we need to say for the veteran. Alright, let's talk my native class, the Zealot. He is the fast, speedy assassin of the Darktide classes. He has the fastest movement speed of all the classes by a long shot. Crazy stamina regeneration of this guy, and because he can put that together with both the Dueling Sword and the Dagger, his strongest two melee weapons, he can use their movement tech to just zip across the battlefield, which means that he has no problem with hordes because he can get them himself out of them. And if he brings his strongest range weapon, which is the Flamer, he can erase them from existence. The Flamer is a really strong weapon, and it bumps him up a couple of tiers in terms of his horde killing capabilities just by its mere existence alone, because that thing is super ammo efficient. I mean, it's literally infinitely efficient. If you have 1 million enemies in front of you and you turn the Flamer on him, it would kill him as quickly as it would kill 10 enemies, right? Because it's just like the flame staff from the Psyker, and it's really ammo efficient, especially if you have a veteran on your team, right? In terms of elite and special killing, he's no slouch here either. He's probably the best elite killer in the game, maybe tied with one other, just because his Dueling Sword attacks, generally we're using Dueling Sword here, right? We're talking about the top tier play. His attacks just absolutely eviscerate these enemies. I mean, he's one-shotting all gunners. He might take 2 shots to kill crushers and maulers, and specials aren't going to be much of a threat because he's so evasive that oftentimes specials have a hard time like tracking him. And he's also got knives as his grenade stand-in, which is free grenades. You get them by killing elite enemies in melee, and those things are great for picking off like trappers and stuff that are coming in very predictable movement patterns. For boss killing, he has really solid boss damage because he is melee focused, and all bosses are generally weak to melee. He especially gets a ton of boss damage in if you are running Charge Zealot and you have the Duelist talent slotted in your tree. You can crush bosses for like tens of thousands of damage. You can hit them with huge hits. As if you bring the Thunder Hammer, you become a boss killing god, and that's something that we've really seen only since boss killing became so important. But the Thunder Hammer is pretty crazy, even though it sucks in a lot of other regards. He's pretty decent against captains as well because of that melee focus, even though his weapons don't really do that much against the energy shields. For defenses, he's the king on top of shit mountain here. Like, he is fucking crazy defensive. 1, the enemies have to fucking catch this guy first, and then 2, they actually have to kill him. And every single one of his abilities, where this is a situation where the Zealot is much different than the Veteran has one the best ability in the game, but he only has one ability to choose from, basically. The Zealot can actually choose. All 3 of those abilities are relevant and very easily capable of clearing the highest level content, and all 3 of them just say, nope, I'm not going to die today. Because if you're getting low on toughness, you can just use your charge ability and ignore all range attacks while you're going towards your target and gain half your toughness back, and you get 2 charges of it, and it comes back every 10 seconds. Or you can use Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude, which we'll come back to talk about in a second, and just say, nope, nothing can kill me for like 10 seconds, which is crazy. And then Stealth is in a world of its own, because you just say, okay, nothing is even going to attempt to attack me anymore, because I'm now fucking invisible. Which, invisible might as well be invincible in this game. So defense is out the wazoo just by the abilities alone, and then you have to consider that this guy has crazy toughness damage reduction built into his tree, and he has like passive ways of regenerating toughness, like second wind at the top of the tree, that just make him super, super hard to put down. There's no other class that gets toughness just from not getting hit, just by like, oh, I had someone shoot at me, I moved to the left a little bit, I just got 15% toughness. So he is crazy defensive, definitely the hardest class to kill. Then we've got crowd control to talk about. So crowd control is his weakness. He's only got one ability that sufficiently crowd controls, and that is Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude, which we just talked about, right? This ability though does a lot of heavy lifting for this class. You can certainly run this class into high tier stuff without this ability, but this ability gives you a ton of support for your team, because not only does it just put every enemy in the game on pause for like 7 seconds, it shoves them back so you can create space for your allies to get through. You can use this to just stall while allies get pickups or whatever. And it suppresses ranged enemies in a really, really large radius around you, so you can use it aggressively to help your team advance into entrenched enemies' positions. Oh, and of course you can use it to knock monstrosity bosses off of ledges, which is my favorite thing to do. I love edging. And yeah, so his crowd control is really just tied to using Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. And as far as class synergies and just generally other reasons why you bring the Zealot, he doesn't use any grenades, because primarily Zealots are using knives. Notice I didn't mention the stun grenades with crowd control because no one is using that tree. But his knives don't consume grenades, so all grenades can go to Ogryns or veterans, which is very nice. And he has a very nice aura in Benediction with 15% toughness damage resistance, which is very, very nice. And that's about it. He's got Chorus, I guess, but we've already addressed that. So he's a solid character. And let's go on to our next one, which is the Psyker. Okay, so right off the bat for Psyker, we gotta say he's definitely top of the list for horde killing. I mean, the Flame Staff alone is going to be the main focus of what we're talking about with Psyker here, because the Flame Staff, and with honorable mention the Void Blast Staff, those two together kill hordes like nothing else in the game. Psykers can rack up literal millions of damage in just half of a mission. I mean, I've seen people drop 2 million damage before even the halfway mark in certain missions with the new Havoc, because there's so much stuff on the screen, and Psyker is kind of unique, excepting like 1 or 2 other weapons in the game, in that those staves can just have they have infinitely multiplicative damage. So the more enemies on the screen, the more valuable the Psyker is for killing and getting rid of those hordes and stuff. As far as elites and specials, elites like gunners are great for the Psyker, because they get suppressed by the flames that are on them. We're going to mostly be talking about the Flame Staff here. I know there's other ways to play the Psyker. You could play with Scryer's Gaze and stuff, but like at his most useful form, I think we're really honestly talking about that Flame Staff and how broken it is. He does have a range limitation, which he can overcome by using Brain Pop on like isolated faraway targets, and Brain Pop is really nice for picking off specials like snipers who can get in very, very difficult to actually shoot positions, but Brain Pop will lock onto them in an instant. Same thing with like trappers who are running all over the place behind hordes. So definitely no slouch in those regards. There is a bit of problem with heavily armored enemies, so like crushers and things like that. not bulwarks so much, but mostly crushers and maulers are kind of a threat to the Psyker because they are not cowed by his flames. They'll continue to advance on him, and if you aren't aware of your positioning, they can very easily crowd you, and you don't have any way. There's no real form of crowd control in the Psyker kit that can get them off of you. So you need to be keeping yourself in a good position. And so the Psyker is pretty reliant on his team to provide crowd control for him, to give him space to just melt everything. As far as melting everything, let's talk about boss killing. Boss killing is kind of a struggle for the Psyker. He does alright against monstrosities, but they have such a high health pool that it's going to take a while for those flames or whatever to deal damage. You could run like a las gun or some sort of setup like that, which does decent damage against bosses, but then you are missing out on that flame staff ability. And you could run Scryer's Gaze and have some decent boss killing potential, captain killing potential with like the Force Greatsword or whatever, but then you're missing out on a very valuable defensive and team contribution tool, which is, of course, the bubble. The bubble, when we're talking about defenses, is probably the most important thing that Psyker can bring, and it's a really important part just specifically for him because he is very frail. If he's caught out of position or gets hit in melee by an enemy, it can be just over. I mean, there's a good number of clips of me just getting hit like one time as Psyker and just being dead. It's very, very unforgiving, but you know, it's a class you can play exclusively as ranged and deal more damage than any other class, so it's the epitome of glass cannon there. Very fast toughness regen, but very low defenses to that toughness. It's very easy for him to get instantly shield broken, and he has no way of generating gold toughness, so he kind of relies on his team to give him a little bit of that for some extra insulation. As I just said about crowd control, there's no real crowd control in the kit. Venting Shriek has some very light crowd control. If you want to really crowd control as a Psyker, you're bringing the Void Strike Staff, which has nice, very nice crowd control, but that's oftentimes not the choice for many Psykers, and you obviously can't bring both that and the Flame Staff at the same time. For class synergies, though, this might be the most synergistic class available, because not only do we have the 10% cooldown reduction aura, which is maybe the best aura in the game, it's up there, it's like number 1 or number 2. He's also got Psykinetics aura, which just recently saw a nerf. It used to be 5% for every elite killed, you know, to everybody on the team for cooldown reduction. Now it's only 4%, you know. I'm not quite yet done crying about it, but very, very strong, right? If you're picking up lots of elite kills, which is easy to do when a horde of like ragers comes at you and you start hitting them with the flame staff, which you can very easily crowd control with left clicks, that's a lot of cooldown for everybody, and everybody having their abilities up that much faster is super, super important. So tons of class synergies here, and everybody loves a bubble. A bubble is so great for getting rid of, I'll get extra points on the boss killing, because Beasts of Nurgles are just completely decimated by the existence of the bubble for whatever reason. But yeah, outside of that, I think we got everything there is to talk about for Psyker. And finally, Ogryn, the big guy, just recently saw a revamp. This tier list, a lot of it comes down to where this Ogryn is going to go. So that's the main reason why I made this list, is because I wanted to assess whether I think that Ogryn position has really changed a whole lot, because he has seen a huge swing in terms of his viability. I'll tell you that much right now. So first off, his horde killing potential is really big. This guy's light attacks, especially when you're spec'd into like a melee build, just smash through hordes. He's got in the heavy hitter tree, which is no longer about heavy attacks, so it should be called hitter tree. That thing has both, you've got options of like Great Cleaver or Impactful, so you can either just stagger everything infinitely, or you can just cleave through massive amounts. So he just mashes through hordes like no problem, and he can dodge in hordes now and just barrel them all out of the way. So if you've got a situation where, say, you're trying to carry a battery to an objective and you've got the Ogryn in front of you and you're carrying, the Ogryn can just dodge into that horde and just hit them like a snowplow and make room for you, which is very nice. So, and he's also got a beautiful set of weapons. he has really limited weapons, but he has some very, very strong weapons. Of note, we've got the pickaxe. I prefer the Car Solus. We've also got the Slab and Shield, which is like the heavy attack king for him. And we've got the Bully Clubs, specifically the Mark IIIB, which is pretty nuts. All three of those just mash hordes. They mash most things, to be honest. And then we can't finish talking about Ogryn weapons without talking about his range choices, of which right now I really feel like there is only one choice, and that is, of course, the Rumbler. The Rumbler grenade launcher, CC, it's just like having infinite grenades. It's like if you were, the shredder grenades for the veteran, but you have 28 of them or something in supply. So this thing is great at CCing. It's amazing at killing Reapers for whatever reason. It instantly kills Reapers. It two shots bulwarks, and then it just chunks bosses as well. It's a very, very solid weapon, and just amazing that he has that as a range choice. So as far as elite and special killing, he's definitely in the top of the class for killing like crushers and maulers and stuff like that. This man can like light attack about 4 times in a second, and it takes 3 of those attacks to kill a mauler, right? So he's just beating these guys down, no problem. He does struggle against specials, though. When you're playing an Ogryn, oftentimes it feels like dogs and chargers and trappers, they have it out for you specifically. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't something in the code that tells them to go for you more often than not. And you will get clipped by that stuff way more than anybody else, because it's so much harder to dodge them as Ogryn than it is as any other class. So you have to dodge at a different timing and way more accurately to get away from trapper nets and mutants and stuff, whereas every other class could just kind of slide out of the way. So special killing really isn't his forte, especially if you're bringing that Rumbler, because you can't just directly shoot the trapper that's running up. You have to arc the grenade, and then he has to actually get hit by it and then get staggered, the whole thing. So specials are kind of a bit of a weak point. Boss killing, on the other hand, though, is definitely the Ogryn's forte here. The Bully Club in specific here just fucking slaps the shit out of bosses. It destroys them. You can beat down a full health Plague Ogryn in like seconds with this thing, because it's stacking bleed through his batter skill, and it's got the additional brittleness on blessing, and it's got the additional damage taken when staggered thing. So not only are you providing boss killing damage for yourself, you're providing it to your team as well. And that the Bully Club will actually, most of his weapons crush captain shields. If you are having problems killing captains, bring in Ogryn. These guys break those shields in seconds. I think the clubs, both the club on the slab shield and the Bully clubs, have like triple damage against those shields. So very, very solid boss killing. Defenses is also some place that he kind of excels. He's got a lot of ways to regenerate his toughness, most of which require him to be in the fray. So he falls behind the Zealot in that regard, where the Zealot can just regenerate toughness just by existing. The Ogryn has to kind of get himself in there. So he can either run over enemies with his charge ability, or he can taunt enemies and get regeneration like that, or just be actually actively hitting and killing things. I don't really want to focus so much on his point-blank barrage ability, because I think that's definitely his weakest ability by like a long shot right now. So talking about those other two, he is very, very defensive. He's pretty dang hard to put down. His one weakness is he doesn't have any gold toughness of his own, so he will take chip damage in melee over time if he's getting meleeed, which it's kind of hard to avoid melee attacks when you're as big as he is. But if you've got gold toughness in your team, you're going to be next to unkillable. So he's a great frontline. And speaking of crowd control king right here for certain. That's the one thing that Fat Shark nailed with the rework, is that he just is like a fucking bulldozer to enemies. Not only can he charge over them with Indomitable with his charging ability, which is like S tier, but he's got another S tier ability in Taunt, which is literal crowd control. Like, think about this. If you taunt every enemy on the map, and they're all chasing you around trying to kill you, but they can't kill you, what does your team get to do, right? Like, that's how powerful this ability is. Being able to taunt these enemies and get them away from your team and just let your team operate with impunity for 15 seconds is extremely powerful. And then he's got like some of the highest, he has the highest stagger values in the game, so he's knocking out enemies flat. He can stagger bosses backwards with certain punch combos. He is the crowd control king for certain. As far as class synergies though, he doesn't offer a whole lot of synergistic things to the group, other than just like, yeah, everyone likes to have a big Ogryn, like that's crowd control and stuff for them. He's definitely a benefitee of class synergies more than he is the contributor. He loves to have a veteran on the team for that ammo, for that rumbler. He loves to have psychers for the bubbles. He loves to have zealots for, I mean, there really isn't any class that doesn't complement the Ogryn well in its current state. All right, everyone, are we ready for the finalized rankings? Well, too bad, because we got to talk about one more topic first, which is what has changed since last year. Because when I made this list last year, I put Psyker in last place, and I put Zealot in first place, right? And that comes down to the task at hand was to solo clutch a game. Was, okay, you've got a Chaos spawn on you, you've got 3 Crushers, you got a Trapper, you got a small Horde. Either go rescue your team, or kill everything and then rescue your team, or clutch out the game in some way. Win the game from this position. And the Psyker struggles, because the Psyker is a win more sort of character. The Psyker can kill stuff real good, right? But the second that you start getting a Chaos spawn who's slapping you around, who's doing that little slappy follow attack, your ability to deal damage is kind of nullified. You can't stand still and blast away with your staff when you got like 3 Crushers up your asshole. So yeah, you got to get rid of these bosses, and you got to like create some space. So it takes a lot of skill with Psyker to maneuver, and it takes like a lot of mobility, like movement tech, to keep yourself distanced from enemies in order to deal the damage you need to be dealing. They deal good damage when the enemies are kept away from them. And that's where Psyker is kind of uniquely reliant on the other classes, because as long as the other guys form like this big defensive wall around the Psyker can, just really deal some crazy damage. But once the enemies get on the Psyker, then we got an issue. At the other end of the spectrum, we had the Zealot, who literally doesn't even fucking care. Like, the Zealot sees that he's got 3 Chaos spawns chasing him and goes, what if I just run to the end of the mission and extract? And that's a legitimate thought you might have as Zealot sometimes, because the Zealot is so fast and so unkillable that he can just do anything he wants. I mean, you can just like run around in the middle of a field even in first season Havoc, where there's all these crazy gunners, because the Zealot can slide for like 95% of his movement, and then all of his abilities just say, nah, fuck off, I'm not dying today. Yeah, he's crazy unkillable, which means he's the clutch god, he's the clutch king. So that's where kind of that split fell. And then the Ogryn fell on the lower end in third place, because he's definitely weaker than the veteran who has, shout and all that stuff. So what has changed for this year? Well, a couple of big things have changed. One is that right after I made that tier list, we had the Unlocked and Loaded update, which introduced the dueling sword to all the human classes. So you can understand what that did, which is it took the Zealot and the Veteran and put them even farther up above everybody else. And obviously the Psyker already had the dueling sword, and doesn't really help them all that much with the problems they have. And the poor little Ogryn didn't get the dueling sword. Frowny face. So those 2 classes went to the moon, everybody else stayed where they were at. And then we had the real big tide turner, which was the Havoc introduction in December. Havoc made the Psyker single-handedly shoot from 4th place to like 2nd in my approximation, because bubble and cooldown reduction became that crazy important. Havoc Season 1 was all about how can you not die to singular scab gunners who are going to shoot you through your orbital in like 0.1 milliseconds after you poke your head out. And the bubble was like the #1 way to do that, in addition to nullifying Beast and Urgle and all that stuff. So the Psyker got a huge amount of value out of that. The Zealot was still in number 1 position because Chorus is so insanely good into Havoc. And oftentimes, I mean, you could tell this is probably true because oftentimes, like, the meta comp was 2 Zealots Chorus and then 1 Void Blast and 1 Flame Staff Psyker. Like, that's a really solid group there. One could have Venting Streak and one could have Bubble. You might sub out 1 Psyker for a Veteran, but no one was bringing Ogryn. Ogryn went straight to the bottom of the pile with Havoc 1 because not only, was he uniquely vulnerable to all the range damage that was coming out in that, but, like, yeah, he doesn't have any defenses. He has to be going and melee attacking stuff to get his defenses up. That was a really big problem for him. And then finally this year we saw the Ogryn rework, which that's, as I said earlier, the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because I think the Ogryn has changed his power ranking significantly. And the changes to Havoc, the way that Havoc has been redesigned to de-emphasize those range killers and emphasize crazy big hordes, tons of elites, tons of specials, tons of bosses, being able to crowd control and stuff like that. I think it's really emphasized things to the Ogryn's strength. And with no further ado, I know you've been waiting like a half hour for me to say that, but let's do this ranking. Let's put them worst to first, last to blast. What's the weakest class in the game? It is Psyker. Psyker is the weakest at Havoc, right? And that comes down to 3 things out of our factors for the power ranking, right? First one is boss killing. Let's talk about that one just in isolation. The Psyker struggles at killing bosses. They don't have very tremendous or impressive damage into monstrosities, and excepting when you're using Venting Shriek, but it's really more of a no pun intended, slow burn way of killing bosses. They're really good at cleaning up hordes and stuff like that. They can do some decent boss damage, but every time you take a weapon that does boss damage, you're sacrificing a weapon that can kill hordes, which is your primary role. And you do have a unique benefit at killing certain bosses, which is the Bubble is very, very useful for Beasts of Nurgle, but we'll talk about that a little more in a second. And then for captains, they're also struggling because those stupid energy shields. Now, Force Greatsword can do some pretty decent damage against captains, their actual flesh, but it's a rough go of it out there with all these bosses, especially if you don't have any allies who can keep the bosses off of you. Psykers really struggle with chaos spawns, because those things are fast as fuck, and they will do that slappy. They'll chase your ass down. Those are really annoying as Psyker, because there's no way to get them off of you. You don't have any CC, and that brings me to talking about my other 2 points for the Psyker, which is the lack of defense and crowd control. And these are tied together because you do have one special layer of defense as Psyker when you bring a Psyker to the team, and that's the Bubble, right? The Bubble is a crazy good defense. It's a way to establish a temporary base of operations so that you can get a forward foothold and start to take your shots and stop the damage that's coming in. So it's a great defense as long as you can hold the position. And New Havoc has a New Havoc has a way of routing your position pretty frequently. I mean, how many times have you been in a position and you're like, we need to fall back? Holy shit, we need to fall back now, because you just see what just spawned up there and there's no way you were holding it at the position you're in with the fucking bubble. And so you fall back, and the second you fall back out of that bubble is no longer useful. We've all had that situation happen where the Beast of Nurgle is trapped in the bubble when we're fighting them, and then the Flame Bomb comes in and you have to retreat and get out of the Flame Bomb, and now the Beast of Nurgle leaves the bubble, and so the bubble is totally irrelevant. So the bubble is only as good as the crowd control as your ability to hold that bubble at that position is, and the Psyker doesn't contribute any crowd control to holding that position. They can only just add more damage to the mix, which is a valuable thing to add. But right now, with the amount of shit that's out there, if I had to pick any class to clutch a situation on a Havoc 40, if I had, the world going against me on a Havoc 40, there's no fucking way you could do that with us. I mean, you could if you're like a really, really good player, but the amount of stuff that the game will crush you with on all sides, there's no way for the Psyker to mitigate it, because you can't keep it off of you. Every other class has a way to do that, and that's the main thing that I want to draw the attention to here as we move from Psyker to the other classes, which is the ability to turn the tides, pun intended. Psyker lacks one. Psyker does not have a way to say, hold up, everybody pause, allies, get back on your feet, here's all your toughness back. Enemies, you are now disabled and unable to do anything for this amount of time, and okay, time in. Every other class, the Ogryn can run over everything with Indomitable, and he can taunt and pull everything off of his entire team. The Veteran can obviously shout and throw out a bunch of grenades. The Zealot can pop chorus, right? All of these things just completely disrupt the enemies. At the same time, they buff your allies and they reverse the roles. They put your team in a winning position and take you out of that losing position, put the enemies in a losing position. The Psyker doesn't have that. The second you lose your posturing, the second you lose your winning, or at least like holding the ground position, that's the second you're in trouble as the Psyker. When you are falling back, you are like, you're really hoping your team can hold the line somewhere, right? So that's what I want to say about the Psyker. All right, let's keep it a little bit shorter and talk about my third place pick, which is the Veteran. The Veteran is still a really good class. All these are still really good classes, by the way. I'm not saying they can't do fucking content. Obviously, the Veteran is fucking good, right? Veteran players, you'll do millions of damage, but does that mean he's the strongest class in the game? No. The Veteran, more and more for me, has been taking on a role of like, oh, I want a Veteran in the team because I want that gold buff and I want the free ammo. Like, that's why you want and I want them to snipe specials for me at like a really long range. But that's about it. Like, I mean, the Veteran is still really good, but the other two classes, the top two classes, are crazy right now. I mean, they've always been, well, one of them's always been crazy, but like, these guys are fucking nuts. The Veteran has been a stable level of nuts for a while, but his tricks of like the shredder grenades and stuff, they're kind of falling behind. And they're falling behind one guy in particular, which is the one we're about to get to. And let me tell you before I get to this, how long I waffled on this decision between who is in first and who is in second place. And ultimately, I had to play the game for an extra like 4 days. I played 2 days on one character and 2 days on the other. You probably saw me do it on a stream. But yeah, I played a lot of it to like really figure it out. And I feel bad not being able to put Ogryn in first place, but Ogryn does get second, but just by a hair. Ogryn is such a fucking tornado of destruction right now. He, like, no joke, just plows through every enemy that cannot disable him. Every enemy that's not a trapper or a dog or a charger or something, he doesn't give a shit about. He just fucking wails on it with the club. This is something I forgot to mention. I just realized I forgot to mention in the part where I was doing the power rankings. His synergy with the rest of the team is fucking bonkers. I don't know why I just discounted that. The amount of damage that he amplifies, not only his damage by, but the whole team when he's hitting enemies in melee, because he has batter. He has which adds damage for zealots for the bleeding, right? He has softened them up, which gives everyone 15% more damage against that target. If the enemy is staggered by when they're using the club on them, it's crazy. I mean, watch a melee focused Ogryn hit a boss like a plague Ogryn or something. He starts hitting the boss, then get your zealot to use chorus, and then just have everyone just stab the boss, and that boss will evaporate. And this guy demolishes, as we've already said in the Ogryn centric part, he demolishes captains, and that grenade launcher is insane. Like a hybrid grenade launcher build where you're shooting off free grenades will drop millions of damage. It is no joke. He is seriously like crazy good right now. I did not think I'd be saying that coming off of reading the patch notes for his rework, but that kit that they've given him, plus the innate strengths of his weapons already, has really, really played to his strengths, especially with the density of stuff in Havoc. He excels at clearing the screen, at controlling everything around him, the ability to like dodge through stuff and just slap everything around with huge levels of impact. Plus, he's got 2 S tier abilities with charge, running over everything and getting all your toughness, getting huge damage boosts. The taunt is just so broken. I love it. Yeah, so he's just barely in that second place, and I have to unfortunately give first place to Zealot yet again. Zealot is just so unkillable. Like, you watch players who are skilled with Zealot, and this is something I was just playing some Havoc 40s, and I was playing with a fellow YouTuber, First Year Guardsman, go check him out, and he was playing Zealot, and he was just like off in the middle of the fucking next area, and he was running around and stabbing gunners to death. And it's like, for anybody else, I'd be worried. Now, he's a good player, but like for any other class, I'd be worried because he could get caught out. But he's Zealot. How the fuck are they going to catch the guy, let alone kill him? Like, if he ever gets in trouble, he'll just pop Chorus and he'll walk back to the group, and it's fine. And then you have to consider how valuable Chorus is to the whole team, and is pushing away bosses. It just puts the whole game on pause. He's got 2 other, like, A to S tier abilities. Like, stealth isn't that great in current Havoc, but it's a really powerful ability in the same right. The number one thing to the game is don't die. The only thing you have to do to win the game is don't die, complete the objectives, and get to the extract. And so killing every enemy in the game is not part of that. The Zealot isn't the best killer in the game. He's pretty strong at killing, but he is by far the most unkillable motherfucker in the world. And see, he can just walk around like he owns the place, because there's nothing that can put him down, and he's so crazy evasive. That's the main thing that holds the Ogryn back over him. If the Ogryn had the mobility, I mean, obviously that would be insane, but like, if the Ogryn could dodge trappers and dogs and stuff like the Zealot can, the Ogryn would be in first place. But the Zealot just gets to whip all over the map and not even have to worry about playing the game in the same way the other characters do. And so there is where the final rankings stand. I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you enjoy listening to me talk about this for the last half hour, however long this ends up being. And yeah, I really appreciate listening. If you enjoy this sort of content, like and subscribe, as I mentioned earlier. Perhaps check out my memberships if you want access to those things I mentioned earlier. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Mystery out. Bye.